Hey guys, welcome back to another 3D printing video. And we got a pretty special video today because we have a Delta printer and it's made by a company called FLSun and the model name is Q5. So I haven't reviewed too many Delta printers, but I'm quite fascinated by them. They're quite interesting how they operate, and plus they're a huge advantage of high-speed printing. So in this video we're going to unbox it, set it up, and do some prints. Alright, so let's get started. Alright, so this is the box that the printer comes in, and it's quite wide, or long I guess, but not very big in height or depth, so it's quite a compact package. Alright, so let's go ahead and open the box. So right off the bat we can see that it looks to be packed very well. We have the nice black foam, and so here right on top we can see the 3 vertical braces, and it looks like they're already pre-assembled, so this is nice. So there's a stepper motor on each one and everything is assembled, which is definitely a huge plus because if you have to assemble these from scratch, they could be quite tedious. Very nice. So it does appear that this printer is quite beginner friendly. So here we have a little note on how to use the automatic bed leveling, the Q5 user manual. So it's kind of like a little pamphlet, and the assembly appears to be quite straightforward. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps looks like overall. So yeah, quite a nice manual and kind of explains everything quickly on how to get started. Alright, so we have the power cord, the USB cable to connect from the printer to your computer, and it's 1.5 meters, a spatula, and it's not sharpened. For this printer it doesn't need to be. So here we have all our connecting rods, and there should be 6 of them in there. Looks like our spool holder, and it's comprised of 2 pieces that go together, and they are both metal. Alright, so let's dig deeper. Lots of foam here. So more parts, and it looks like some filament in there, tools, hardware, zip ties, and cutters. We'll take a closer look at this in a bit. Alright, and here it looks like we have the hot end, and it is all pre-assembled, so it looks quite interesting. Now there's 3 brackets here where all the arms connect. We have an axial cooling fan and a fan duct that goes down. Here's our heat block, and there's not a silicone sock on it. Here's some kind of bracket here, and it almost looks like an accessory mounter. And we do have a large cooling fan for the heat break. Alright, so it is all pre-assembled, and looks like all we have to do is plug it in. Very nice, and there is a little clip here that's holding the coupler from coming loose on the PTFE tubing. Alright, so we got a few more pieces. Okay, so I guess this is the piece that clips on. Let's go ahead and look at this a little closer. So this is the leveling switch, and we can see that there's a little point right here at the end, and then it's like a little small switch that when you click it, it activates. And that's what this part here was for, is to connect this leveler switch, and it's just magnetic, and this is how it's going to go around and probe the bed for leveling. And I'm very happy to see that it does have out of bed leveling, and I guess for this kind of printer you definitely would have to have one. Alright, a couple more pieces left. The frame with the bed, and if you guys can see, it is that ultra base style bed that has the little dimples, and this is definitely the new trend because you get the best of all worlds. You get a really flat surface, but also when this thing heats, print really sticks, and when it cools off it just pops right off. So this is the bottom frame. We got a QR code here, nice little logo on the build plate. But here's a huge plus, it is also insulated. Very nice. And so this piece is the very bottom, and you guys can see there's little rubber feet, and there's 3 of them on each corner. So yeah, so far everything is looking really nice. Alright, so for our last piece is the upper portion, and it's also a triangle, I guess indicating Delta, right? So this part of the printer includes all of our electronics. This is where everything connects, and it is the upper portion of the printer. So here we're looking at the very top, and this is where our spool holder will go. So let's go ahead and look at one of the sides, which is the back here. So this is where we're going to plug in our power. It is fused on and off switch. USB connection, micro SD card slot. Here we have a sticker that says that the printer is defaulted to 220 volts and we'll have to change that. And over here we have the label that tells us our model number, Q5, our build size, which is 200 by 200. That's a very nice size for a Delta printer. Our nozzle, and then it weighs 8 kilograms. It's about 16, 17 pounds, and some more basic information there. And so one of the other ends here, we can see that there's some plugs coming out, and we have the extruder. And this printer actually includes a Titan extruder. So it's a geared type extruder. And it's nice to see that it's upgraded to this because these are a lot more reliable and stronger when it comes to high speed printing. Looks like we have some venting here. And here we have the front face. So we have a nice little logo. And this is our little touch screen. Let's go ahead and peel this off. So it is quite small, you can see my finger, but this is a small printer. You guys can see my hand in the whole printer. And amazingly enough, the print size is very large for the size of the printer. And this is what the bottom looks like. So we can see our power supply, our main board over there, our extruder motor, and basically all our wiring comes from out of there. Now the switch that they were talking about is actually right here, and you can see it, and it is set to 220 right now. So before I forget, I'm gonna grab an Allen wrench out of this bag, and I'm gonna go ahead and set it to 115. So I don't forget later. Alright guys, and that's pretty much all the pieces from the printer. Alright guys, so I want to open this plate up on the top here so we can see inside a little better. But before we do that, we need to grab some tools from here. And let's go ahead and see what's in this bag. So it looks like we have some zip ties, little bolts, and there's quite a few of them. A micro SD card with a USB adapter. It looks like a little roll of yellow PLA filament. Some pretty nice high quality snippers. A little wrench, a flat screwdriver, and our Allen wrenches. So there are 6 bolts, 2 on each end. And once we get them out, the top plate should just come right off. And now we can see quite a bit better of how everything is put together. So here we have the main board, and I can see already that the stepper drivers are removable and they are heat sinked. Very nice. So these are upgradable. We do have an ARM processor, and the board itself is called MakerBase MKS Robin Nano version 1.2. So yeah, looks like everything is put together very nicely. All the connectors are crimped. Our power supply here is right in the middle, and it's not a large supply, but it is a 24 volt 240 watts looks like. Alright, so very nice build. So I'm going to go ahead and put this cover back on, and then we'll start the assembly. Alright, so step 1 of the assembly. So it looks like we're going to be inserting the 3 main arms into the top base. So I got it sitting upside down, and we're just going to grab one of these arms, and I think they're all the same. So they all will have 2 plugs, one motor plug and then one limit switch plug. So there's going to be 2 wires coming out of the base, so we need to move those out of the way. And then we're going to simply just set our motor in there. We need to be careful with the wires. So it looks like the wiring can go through this hole here. This frame here will line up with the holes on the base. And we're going to take our little baggie of bolts and we're going to start them. So yeah, 1, 2, 3, and we can go ahead and snug these up. So we could go ahead and plug our wires in, which is quite simple. The X here are labeled X and they go together. It's a black wire. And then our motor plug will plug in right into the stepper motor, just like that. So if you find it easier to plug it before you even screw these in, you could do that. So it doesn't really matter. Just make sure you're not going to pinch any wires anywhere between the metal. That would definitely be bad. So yeah, now we're going to do the same thing for the other 2 legs. Set it in there, grab our little bolts, and snug them up. Plug our wires in, and that's it. Move to the other foot. Alright, so the 3 legs are on, and this is what it looks like. So for step 2, we're going to connect the other end of the legs to the base frame where the bed is, and that's this piece here. And so the legs are going to sit right here on each corner. So I'm going to grab the printer and flip it around. Now make sure you line the front of the printer, which is where the screen is, to here where the logo is. So we're just going to simply set it over just like that, and same little bolts will go right here. There's 2 of them on each side of the leg. So yeah guys, as you can see so far, this is a very straightforward and easy assembly. So I'm going to go ahead and snug these up, and we're going to do the other 2. Alright, and so this is what it looks like so far, and look how low the build plate is. I really like this design. It's different. Normally the electronics are on the bottom, but here they're on the top, so definitely a really unique feel to have it this low. Alright, so step 3 is installing all of our arms. So these are the arms that go between the hot end and the 3 corners. So they are shrink wrapped. And there are 6 of them, and we can see the little bolts are already pre-mounted. And the ball bearings in there are all metal, so that's nice to see. So they should be very tight tolerances with no slop, which is quite important for a Delta printer. All right, so we're gonna just grab 2 of these, and then we're gonna grab our hot end. I'm gonna go ahead and take this little sensor off so it doesn't fall off. And here we can see the mounting bracket. There's threads at the end of it, and we're gonna start the bolt right on there. So just like that, and there's gonna be an arm on each end. And by the way, they do have some Loctite on the threads, so it doesn't unscrew itself. And then we're going to take our wrench and tighten it, but be careful when you tighten this because you don't want to over tighten it because these are very small threads. And that's it, and that's what one of the arms will look like. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put all of the braces on the hot end, and then we'll connect them to each of the legs. So all of the rods are on, and you guys can see how that goes. So it's quite simple. Now they are going to point up like this with the nozzle going down. But before we install them into the ends, we need to check, make sure that our rollers on the inside, this does travel on the channel around it, that they're nice and smooth. So this one is very smooth and there's no play in it. This one is, I think, too tight because, yeah, it is. It's holding up in places. So that means one of the rollers are way too tight. This one in the back feels perfect. Very smooth and it doesn't move around. So these 2 are good, but this one, if you go up and down and you feel any kind of bumpiness or jumpiness or grabbiness, that means that the roller is probably too tight. So what we need to do is adjust that roller. So if you look on this side, you can see there's a cover, and on the other end we have 2 bolts here that hold that cover. So we can go ahead and undo them, and that's going to cut the cover loose. And now if we go to the side, we can see our little rollers here. I can see that they're way too tight because if I try to spin one, I can't even do it. And so this adjusts the same way as a normal 3D printer. There's 2 stationary rollers, and then there's one that has an eccentric nut. And that's what this provided wrench is for, is to turn this eccentric nut, to loosen and tighten this roller. It looks like we need to loosen it a little more. Now when you do get it just right, there is a bolt here that we'll have to tighten. And you might want to go ahead and do it right off the bat, and then fine tune it here. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to make the compression between the channel here, it's just barely tight where you're able to still spin this roller. As you can see, I can spin it, but there is some friction to it. And so there's no wobble, and also the rollers are quite free to spin. And now we have a very smooth motion, and there's no grabbiness whatsoever. So if any of your sides are too tight or too loose, you definitely want to open this little cover up and adjust them. Now I can go ahead and put this cover back on. Alright, so now that we know that all of our rollers are fine, we can go ahead and bring these up. And the reason you want them higher is because the rods, they go up to the brackets, so your nozzle goes down. And the way you want to orientate this, according to the manual, this corner here, if you can see, the cooling duct is on the right side and the magnetic is on the left, and it kind of goes on an angle like this. So here's a heat break fan, points literally at this left leg. So yeah, we're just going to simply start these little bolts into our metal brackets right here. So now again, be very careful when you tighten these because they're quite little bolts and it's very easy to strip them. So yeah, we're simply just going to go around and put all of our arms on the brackets. And just like that, all of our corners are on. And you guys can see how the head moves down there. It's very cool. So if you've never had a Delta printer, it's definitely something quite unique. The way the hot end travels on these arms seems very unusual. So yeah, everything looks good and it's all smooth. And so that leads us to the next step, which is 4, and that's installing the spool holder. So the spool holder just has 2 pieces here that come together, and we're going to be using the same little bolts we've been using for all the frame. And so there are threads on the other end, and the bolt will just screw into that. Now it is a little bit finicky because they're quite close together, but they do go on no problem. It's kind of interesting how they decided to go with this quite narrow and very thin part on the top. Maybe that's plenty for just about everything, or maybe they don't want you to put in the huge spool on there because it is going to be on top, and this printer is quite small, so it's probably not designed to hold anything more than a 2-kilogram spool. So there's 2 threaded holes on the top, and that'll line up with the bottom of the spool holder. And this does go to the front. Snug them up. All right, and our spool holder is on. And so here on the extruder side, we can see that our filament will go straight into the extruder and then out of the extruder into the print head. And believe it or not, guys, that is all of our assembly steps. The step 5 is connecting all the wiring. So connecting the wiring is very easy on this printer. So we only have a few plugs to plug. So this one here comes down from the bottom. This is the heated bed and the temperature sensor, and that's going to plug right here. So we got the bigger white plug for the power and a little black one for the temperature sensor. And then we have a few wires to connect here at the hot end. So they're all color coded, black to black, white to white, yellow to yellow, and red to red. And then we have one more left over, and that says level on it, so that will go to our leveling sensor. So whenever we do the leveling, we're gonna plug it in, and then when we're done, we just plug it out. All right, and for our last connection, we have the PTFE tubing, and that's gonna go straight to our extruder to the top. And so we're just gonna stretch it out and plug it into our extruder coupling here. But before we do, we need to pull out the little clips that holds the little tab. So we're just gonna simply push it in there as far as it goes, and then put our little clip back in there. All right, and so this is how it goes. Now we could zip tie it here a little bit, since it does stay together, the wiring and the tube. If we go all the way up here, we can see that they do want to stay together. So let's grab some of our provided zip ties. And by the way, there was a clean out needle with the zip ties. I didn't even notice it, it's so thin. So we're just gonna zip the wires and the PTFE tubing together. You definitely don't want to zip anything to these arms or anything else, just together to themselves. And this will give it some form as it travels, so it kind of stays together. All right, so we're just gonna cut off the excess, and that's it. That looks much better and cleaner. And so that is the whole assembly process. And as you guys saw, that was not very difficult to put together, and actually quite simple. So if you're intimidated by Delta printers, this one here is a great place to start because it's quite simple and goes together quite easy. So let's go ahead and install the sensor underneath our hot end. So it'll just magnetically clip on there. And then our wire will connect to this plug that says level on it. And just like that. So now we are ready to level the bed. Now before I power it on and level the bed and check everything, let's go ahead and take a quick look on how this thing is built. All right, so starting up here, we have the spool holder. So the whole machine is like a triangle, and that's the whole footprint. And I don't know if you guys can tell, but it's a really nice size, and I'm quite impressed of the build volume. And especially being a Delta printer, they're quite tall, so you do have to consider that. So we have the 3 arms that travel up and down on these channels. I definitely like how they use these steel rods. The most important part about a Delta printer, because this thing moves really fast back and forth, these need to be very precise and strong to survive over time. And this printer also has an extremely low profile on the bottom, and that's quite unique. I'm literally at the bottom of the table. You guys can see how thin that thing is. So we have a 200mm circle. Let's go ahead and pull off this protector off of it. Very nice build volume. You can print quite a few things on this, and we can also go 200mm tall. So yeah, overall a very nice and polished looking printer. Also guys, I noticed that there are 3 holes here, and looks like we also need to put the little bolts in there also, and that's going to help us with the rigidity of the structure. All right, so we're gonna snug these up, and now we feel definitely a bit more solid. All right, so let's go ahead and plug it in and power it on. So since our plug is on the top, the wire will be kind of hanging down. So I'm gonna hit the power button, and it does power on. All right, so we had a little logo, and here is our main menu. So the UI looks really nice. We have a darkened background, which is a nice look. And I like how they have the hot end, the bed, and the fan speed here. And so our hot buttons are preheat, tools, set, and print. So let's click on the preheat. So here we can choose PLA. Let's go to tools here. So under tools, we can see all these other functions. We also have a preheat here. And here we can change between the bed and the extruder. The increments of change, close button, and a back button. I guess close means stop preheating. Well, let's take a look at all of our other options here. We have extrude. This is where we can pull filament in and out. Control our axes. Then we have our home button. So if we push that, our printer should home. And then our auto leveling button, change filament, and we have more. So here it looks like we can change the size of the print and also the curvature. That's interesting. I'm not sure how exactly this works, but it does have this options here. All right, so let's click the home button and see what the printer does. So I'm gonna click on home, and there it goes, it's moving. So it looks like all the axes are going up to the limit switches. It looks like everything works there. So it is homed. All right, so we did get this paper here to assist us in bed leveling. So here it says clean the build plate and then attach our leveling switch, which we did already. Step 3 here says to remove the sensor before clicking moved Z to 0 button. And then we're gonna use a sheet of paper to Z offset to the bed. All right, so we're gonna click on out of bed leveling. So here we have auto bed leveling, move to 0, adjust Z, and manual. So let's click on auto. It says please plug in the sensor, which we did, confirm. Alright, so it looks like it's probing the bed. Okay, so it's just going corner to corner. Alright, so it looks like it only needs to probe 3 points. So now it's coming back down again, and I guess it's checking one more time. Alright, so it just keeps going at it, and now it's actually taking different measurements. Okay, so now it's taking more precise measurements where it's going all over the bed. So this procedure is definitely a bit longer than I thought initially. Alright, so I think it's probably done now. Oh, it's going back down. But it's still continuing to take measurements. So I'm not sure what's happening now. Either it's going in a vicious loop or it's still calculating the, I guess, the leveling. So I'm just going to leave it alone and see what happens. Alright, so it did actually finish now after probing that time. So yeah, be patient. This takes a while. Alright, so now we can go ahead and take the sensor off. So let's unplug it and just pull it right off. And now we can click our Move Z0 button right here. That's flashing. And it's going to ask to confirm. Alright. So it should go down to where it needs to be. So here you guys can see maybe the nozzle is a good distance away from the bed. So we're going to need to adjust that. So we are going to need a piece of paper. I'm just going to use these instructions here. So what we're going to do now is click on the next button, which is flashing, called Adjust Z. And when we click that, we can see we can go up and down by clicking the plus and minus. And then once we get it just right, we'll click the save button. So basically what we're doing is we're trying to get the nozzle closer to the bed. So I'm going to go ahead and click the plus, and that's actually the wrong one. You need to click the minus to go down. So 0.5 of a millimeter lower. So now I'm 1 millimeter lower. Okay, I'm starting to feel a drag. So minus 1.1 for me, because a little more is too tight. So yours is probably going to be different, but once you get it just right, you can click the save. So that's raising up, and technically that's it. We should be done. So let's go back. And back again. So the first part of it did take a while because it did quite a few readings, but overall pretty simple, and now we should have a perfect level every time. So for the next part, let's go ahead and put some filament in, and we'll use this yellow that came with the printer. So we need to go ahead and preheat the nozzle in the bed, and we have a hot button right here that we can push, and then it goes straight to preheating, and they have PLA. So if we click it, you can see it's going to go to 210 and 50 on the bed. Normally these coils of filament are not very pleasant to use because they get all tangled, and not only that, like, there's a crack in the coil already here. There's a couple pieces. So unless you want to absolutely use this, you might be better off using your own filament, because these will get tangled really quick and get quite frustrating. So I might use this, but I'm just going to get my own roll. So let's just start with this Overture PLA Pro blue filament. So this is a really nice color, and we're going to be able to see how well the spool goes in here. So it does fit, and you can see that it perfectly fits on this bracket here. If it was any bigger, it just would not fit. So let's go to our extruder side. Now you always want to cut the filament on an angle, and that way it's able to feed through all these mechanisms much easier. So on the extruder here we have a tensioner. So this is just to make it how hard it pushes. And by the way guys, there is no filament detector on this printer. So technically not a big deal, but if your filament breaks or you run out, I guess you will have a failure. Alright, so what I like to do is I like to push my filament through all the way to the hot end. So the filament should be in the hot end. Let's click on Tools, click on Extrude, that we can push the filament in and out, and we can actually control how much of it, 5, 10, and 1 millimeter. So let's put it on, actually 10 is probably good. So we're going to click on N, and that should push it through. And we should be able to see it here shortly coming out of our hot end. And if you click it more times, it'll just add to that. So you can click it 4 times and it'll go straight to 40 millimeters. Alright, so we can see it's seeping out, and it looks like there was some kind of lighter test filament. Need to extrude until we can see some blue there. And there it goes, it's turning blue. So let's go ahead and grab our micro SD card, and it is unmarked. And by the way, this is what the adapter looks like, which is quite interesting because you put the micro SD card in here, and that's the USB part of it. Kind of crazy, but I've actually never seen one of these yet. And now we're going to insert the card into the printer, and it looks like it goes right side up on this printer. Yeah, it does. So let's go back, and actually guys, I don't think we've looked at the set button here. So if we click on that, we can see here we can set the fan, we can continue a print, so it does look like it has power loss resume. We have language, which by the way is quite a few of them here. Oh, that's cool. And then we have the sea level erase, stepper motors off, and about, which is about this printer. Alright, so if we click on this print button here, it's going to load what is on the SD card. So usually they give us a few models to print, and we do have here a few of them. So let's see if there's more. Okay, so there's other files in here that come with the printer. Alright, so I'm not exactly sure what these are, but let's click on the first one. And it does say here, elephant. Okay, what about the other one? It's a knurling. So, okay, let's just go with the elephant. And we'll see what that looks like. So we're going to click confirm, and this is the menu that we get. We get the progress bar, our file names on top, the time that passed, the Z position, the hot end temperature, the bed temperature, and our fan speed, which is 0 right now. And this is the parts cooling. And here we have an options button where we can adjust certain parameters. So yeah, it started up and it's boogieing along already. Let me bring the camera down. So yeah guys, you can see that it looks like everything's okay and our level is looking quite good. So the out of bed leveling worked perfect. And it's definitely moving a little quick for my likings, especially on the first layer. But you know, it being a Delta printer, it's already showing off its skill, which is speed. So I'm kind of curious what will happen on the second layer if it's going this fast on the first layer. But yeah, it looks like some kind of little elephant. But yeah, I'm quite happy to see that our leveling is pretty much perfect and the layers are going down beautifully. So let's check out what kind of options we have. So we can pause the print, we can stop the print, we can adjust the temperature, change filament, adjust fan speed, the printer speed, and looks like we can also offset the Z-axis, move it up and down. Well, that's a go feature. So if your nozzle is a little bit too low or too high, you could adjust it right here. All right, cool, very nice. So let's just click here on this temperature. So yeah, you just go up and down and adjust it. Very intuitive and easy to use menu. So it looks like we're off the first layer and the printer is printing away. And by the way, the printer is very quiet overall except for fan noise. I'm going to put the microphone closer to it. First the bottom. And now let's go to the top. So I'm right next to the motors. And you guys can hear that it's very quiet. So it does have the silent stepper drivers. So I'm going to let this print finish and we'll see what it looks like. Okay, so it looks like our little elephant is done and it took exactly 2 hours. Pretty quick. So the bed pretty much cooled off. Let's see how easy this comes off the build plate. All right. Okie dokie, not too bad. So it looks like there was a brim around it and that decided to stay. But yeah, as you saw guys, this is the advantage of having a build plate like that. It just pops right off. Now it does have to cool down. If you don't cool it down, it will be very hard to take it off. So we have FL Sun here. So this is the top, looks really good. But more importantly, let's look at the walls. And I don't know if you guys can see, but the walls are very good. I would actually say pretty much excellent. A lot better than I expected. You can almost not see any kind of layering. The layers are sitting really nice. And here's our bottom, and because it's on that glass bed, it looks so good. This is a good sign that we should be getting really nice prints out of this printer. So I'm going to go ahead and print the other thing that was on the SD card. And then I want to do some speed tests. Because this is a Delta printer, we should really see what this thing's capable of at higher speeds. Alright, so we have 3 of our benchies, a calibration cube. The cube was printed at 60 millimeters per second, and the benchies are 50, 80, and 100. So let's go ahead and look at the cube first. So because of the way this printer operates, there's actually not really an X or a Y. But we can really see what our print quality looks like, if there's any ghosting or anything. So we can see there's practically no ghosting, very minor. And there's a little bit of print vibration, but not bad at all. So overall the layers are sitting very nicely and our corners are nice and sharp and straight. So here's the Y and then our walls. So overall very nice. top looks great, and the bottom obviously looks perfect also. And by the way, I'm using silk black as the filament so we can really see everything. And also I printed this at 0.15 millimeter layer height. So let's look at our 15 millimeter. This one actually turned out really good, so we can see the reflections. Now this filament is very shiny, so it reveals everything. So overall, you guys can see we have very nice uniformity, and the front of the Benchy is very nice and sharp, and just a really good ball. Exactly what you would expect out of a good quality print. So we can even read hashtag 3D Benchy there. So now there was a little bit of retraction problems. You kind of see the hairs, and that's going to get worse as the speed goes up. But as far as the print goes, it's pretty much as good as it gets for quick printing. And the reason I say quick printing, even this Benchy sliced at 50 millimeters a second still prints almost twice as fast as it would on a normal 3D printer. And I'm not sure what that is, but I think the Delta style movements are just much quicker overall as they travel around, which cuts the time dramatically already. So this Benchy here printed in 1 hour and 35 minutes, which is quite impressive, and still retaining this kind of quality. And we can see here on the back of our box we have that open slit in between the two pieces, so we can see the accuracy is very good on this printer. So yeah, 50 looks good. Let's go to 80 next, and hopefully you guys can see this. Compared to the 50, the 80 looks a little bit more rougher. Not a huge difference, but there is a difference obviously, and you can kind of see in the walls. There's just more vibrations in the 80, and you can kind of see on all the walls around. So not bad, just not as good as the 50, but very acceptable for sure overall. And then here we have 100 millimeters a second, and this one is even more rougher looking, but surprisingly not a big difference between the 80. And one of the reasons I think for that is because some of the movements are limited, but you guys can see it does look quite a bit rougher actually now that I'm looking at it. So yeah, it can still hold form quite well at 100 millimeters a second, but the sweet spot looks like is maybe somewhere in the 70s, or even the 80 here looks pretty darn good. So the 50 took 1 hour and 35 minutes, the 80 took 1 hour and 15 minutes, and then the 100 took 1 hour and 5 minutes. So you can see going from 80 to 100, it's not really saving too much time. So I would say if you're comparing this to a regular 3D printer like a Ender 3, then even this first 50 millimeters a second still finishes in half the time or even less than an Ender 3 would with the same settings. So for the next part, let's go in the computer and we'll check out what's on the SD card. And also we're going to go over the Cura profile right quick so you can slice your own prints. All right, so here we are at the computer, and I have the SD card open, and there's everything we can see in it. So these are the G codes I put in here. So we have our assembly instructions, pictures of the assembly step by step, more pictures about different things. So they actually go quite in good detail here, telling you how to adjust and use everything, which is definitely appreciated. We also have a couple videos, and here we have a software folder, and this is where you can install Cura, and they also have a video for that. And then we have a couple folders of the firmware and host files, and at the bottom here we can see the 2 test files, and they include the STLs to them too. So all right, so let's go ahead and open up Cura. You can download the latest version and then set up your machine through there, or you can use the one off of the SD card if you've never used Cura. But it's quite simple. When you download it, you're gonna get to this menu here where it says add printer, and you're going to click on not network printers, and then you're going to go down and find FL Sun, and then they're going to have 2 versions here. So I just chose the QQS, and then you're going to click add, and in the machine settings all you're going to do is just change these parameters here, which is 200 by 200 by 200, and that will set the dimensions for the Q5, and everything else should be the same. So this is the easiest way to get it going. And Cura is quite easy to use. You just grab an STL model. I'll just say Benchy. So here we can see our build volume, and if you click on the Benchy, it'll select it, and then you can move it around. You can use these little arrows here to move it, or you can actually type in your parameters here. Same thing for the scaling and rotating, and then you got a few more options down here. But the most important part is going to be over here, and this is going to be your print settings, and this is what I printed with. So I'm just going to go over it real quickly. Which layer height I use 0.15. And the wall line count is 3. I like to use that because the walls are nicer usually. Temperature is 205. Here's where you're going to put your print speed in. So I would say 50 is a great speed because this printer is already very quick, even on 50. So if you want to experiment with faster or slower, you can adjust all that there. Now here we have the retraction, and this is definitely not enough. I need to bump this up probably to 7 or 8.5 to get a little better retraction. So yeah, everything else is quite straightforward. And I do usually use a skirt with 3 lines around the model to purge the nozzle. So yeah, nothing too special, just the normal. If you go over any of these, you can see there's a little gear here. If you click that, you can choose all the options that you want to show up, and there's a gazillion of them. And to see more and less options, you're going to click these little lines right here, and it's going to ask you what you want to see. So I have a custom, so I just choose what I want to see and it pops up. But if you go to basic, it'll almost show you nothing, just very, very basic stuff. So yeah, after you're done playing with these settings, all you're going to do is click the slice button down here, and it's going to slice the model. And it's going to tell us how long it's going to take, which is 1 hour and 36 minutes. Very quick for 50 millimeters a second. And if you click on the preview here, you can actually preview each layer and how it'll print. Down here we can push the play button and we can see where our nozzle is going to move. So pretty cool. So then we're going to click the save button, and it's going to save to wherever you want, either straight to your card like it is right now, or you can choose to save straight to the computer. Either way, it's going to produce a G-code, and that's what you're going to take to the printer. So there's plenty of great videos out there if you want to learn more how to use Cura. Hopefully this helped a bit. Alright guys, so after these Benchy's, I printed quite a few things, as we can see here. And overall, I've had really good success with this printer. Now, with that said, it wasn't all perfect, and some of it was me trying to figure out the retractions. So we've seen the little elephant here, and I think this is actually also, looking at it more, it's a phone stand. You put your phone on here and it holds it, so kind of cute little thing. But the other file that was included with the printer was this bolt, and it's actually a bolt and a nut, and they printed both together like this, and it turned out amazing actually. And just looking at this finish here, you guys can see it's very detailed and quite astonishing actually. Here's our bolt, same thing on this, and the bolt itself, the threads look really nice. So this thing popped off and the nut goes on the bolt perfectly. And the tolerances is very good. It's barely moving around inside the bolt. So a very nice print. Definitely love this model. A lot of times the models they give you with the printers are not that good, but this one had pretty good ones. So I actually went ahead and used the yellow filament that came with it. Even though it was in a coil, I was able to straighten it out and use it. So I did print this little froggy here, but the issue with the froggy was my retraction. As you guys can see, it's a little messy looking. So I didn't even clean them up at all. So I just wanted to leave it the way it is. And all this stuff comes off quite easy actually. Just peels right off. So the quality of the print is pretty nice. And what I noticed is that this printer leaves like a matte finish on the print. I don't know if that makes any sense, but like it's not shiny the way it lays it down, but it has a matte texture to it. So it's got a very fine grain in the print. But yeah, as far as the form itself, it looks great. And now we do have some retraction problems all around the print. So yeah, retraction definitely needs to be bumped up to 8 millimeters or even more. But yeah, not a bad little print here. So the other thing I printed with the same filament was this bearing. Now because of the retraction problems, there's a lot of hairs in between all the gears. So I'm not even sure if this thing can break loose. I haven't even tried it yet, but I have a feeling it's gonna have a hard time. But here you guys can see the bottom. It looks really nice. Now these type of beds make really nice bottoms. And as you guys can see here, our walls are also very nice and uniform, and they have that matte finish to it. So let's go ahead and try to spin this thing. And right off the bat, I can't spin it. So I can feel that it's loose somewhat, but it doesn't spin easily. So maybe I'll grab an Allen wrench and stick it in there and see if we can spin it then. All right guys, so I was able to put an Allen wrench in here and actually spin it, and it went pretty easy. It did have to kind of chunk up those little hairs all around, but once it did that, it spins pretty good. But I do still have to use the Allen wrench to spin it. I can spin it by hand, but it's a little hard. So overall, I guess still successful. If it wasn't for the retraction problem, I don't think this would have been an issue because the tolerances feel really good. And I was expecting good tolerance out of this printer in the beginning because of the way the Benchy's printed. And the way I know a printer has excellent tolerances because of this gap here in between those two boxes right there. You can see that little gap. So if it has that gap, 99% of the time, it's gonna have really good tolerances for moving parts. So this printer definitely has that. All right, so this wasn't fused. It was just clogged with retraction hairs, and it spun right up, so that's a good sign. And so for our next prints, I have the space guy and the spaceship, and also a pretty large vase. Now I decided to print the space guy here, which is a little MatterHacker model, a lot smaller than I normally do, so we can see a little better of how the details come out in miniature form. And as you guys can see with this silky bronze filament, it turns out really good. And hopefully you guys can see the patterns there, the vibration patterns. And this is what I was talking about, as it has those on all the prints. So it's not a bad look, it just has a texture to it, I guess. So this model is very small. You can kind of see by my fingers. So you can see all the accuracy and details are very nice. And the amount of grip we had to the build plate was tiny. Boots have ridges here, so there's barely anything that's touching the plate, and it's still stuck and finished printing. But a little piece of the shoe here did mess up, so. But overall, still very impressive. So yeah, even though this is a Delta printer, and this printed quite quick actually, I think this was under an hour that I printed this little guy. It looks really good for those parameters there. So I also had to print the spaceship. Now this thing didn't turn out like I wanted it to for sure, and there is a couple little flaws in it. So flaw number one, you guys can kind of see right here. Well, it's pretty much breaking apart. You see that little line around there? That's actually not the printer's fault. That was me moving the printer around as it was printing, making some B-roll shots. So I kind of messed it up, flexing the frame. And then if we look at the finish, we have that grain pattern. So this is silky silver, and it doesn't look very silky. So this printer is not very good with silky filaments because it kind of defeats the purpose of the shine, because it makes it all into grain. So it all kind of looks like this. So not a bad look, just, you know, definitely not what you expect out of silky filament. But as far as the print overall, it looks really good. There is a little hairs here and there, not sure why, but they're very, very fine hairs. So there was no retraction in this print, obviously, because it's just one perimeter all the way around. But for some reason, the nozzle still was making these little fine hairs, and it's only on one side. There's no hairs on the other sides. But this is quite a bit smaller spaceship than I normally print, because we only have a 200 millimeters to work with here. So this upper part is definitely going to be harder to print because it gets really thin. And as you guys can see, it was not able to print this thin while keeping the form without melting it all together. So, and there's supposed to be a little ball up here which also melted. But that's about typical for this kind of scale. All right, and so for our last print, we have this vase, and this is also printed in spiralized mode, just like the spaceship. And I wanted to print this because we can see the layers and how they're sitting, and overall it looks pretty good. So they're all very uniform and nice looking. Now there is a bunch of lines in it, and I'm not sure if that's the filament or just the transition in the color or what, but there are some lines here. And they're not layers, they're just discoloration. So, but overall it turned out really good, and this is the full height, 200 millimeters, and it's quite wide also, I think about 180 or so on the widest part. So, but the thing I realized on this printer is, if we look at the top, we can see there's something a little bit funny going on right here. So this is actually the print head not being able to print that far off. And then I realized that in a Delta printer, once you get high enough up, you don't have the full circle volume as you do on the bottom. And so to demonstrate that, I'll put this vase back under here, and what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna move one leg down and the other two are gonna be all the way up, and we're gonna move this one leg down. Well, actually in this case, two legs were going down, not just one. So if we go down with two legs and leave one up, you can see how the print head lowers quite a bit when this thing is all the way up. So you can see that if they're both lowering, trying to reach this corner over here, it's not fitting anymore. It's because the geometry is not letting it go wide enough without going down, because of this leg here not being able to go up as much. So basically all that means is the higher you go, the narrower your volume gets. And you can see this was quite narrow, but it was to one side. I can't remember which way. But in any case, it looks like it was pointing towards one of the legs. So this is just to keep in mind that as you go up, you can't really have a really wide print. Now, if you wanted to know how wide you can go, leave one foot up and take these all the way to the corner. That'll be about right here. I have to hold it, it keeps falling. So about right there in the corner is the widest it can go, right? And you guys can see, even though this is almost 200, there's no way it fits in there. So it looks like maybe more of like 180 or so would be the maximum volume going up. But yeah guys, overall as a printer, I think it's a really nice printer and definitely a great beginner Delta printer. So obviously its strongest asset is print speed, and it definitely proves it could do that, because it does a normal Benchy there in just an hour and 35 minutes, which is quite impressive. And if you bump up the speed, you can you know, get that down. So that in itself is already quite cool because you just don't have to wait that long at all to print much. And that's what I've noticed. All these prints just printed so quick compared to what I'm used to. And also the overall footprint of this thing is quite small. Like the amount of room it takes is not very much. And you know, it is a little bit tall, but it's not too tall. So being a desktop printer, it's very nice size. And another big plus to it is that it is very easy to assemble. So if you're just starting out and you don't want anything too complicated, this one is not very hard to build. So overall, I think this is a great machine. The only thing it really needs, looks like, is a little bit more retraction. I got to play with those settings. Now, I wish this printer did have a run-out filament detector, but technically not a big deal because you're not going to be printing anything too huge on here. It does have power out resume, and I definitely love this build plate and that the prints stick very well when it's hot, and then when it cools off, they just pop right out. And plus, not to mention how unique this printer looks because of its really low profile. It's really interesting and quite a nice piece to look at, especially when it's printing. So as a hobbyist machine, this would definitely be a joy to have. All right, guys, well, hopefully you enjoyed this video. And if you did, then hit that like button. And if you want to pick up the Q5 for yourself, I'll have some links in the description. Check that out. And also, if you enjoy videos like this, I got a lot more 3D printing videos in the playlist. And also, there's a lot more to come, so stay tuned. And as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.